Hi everyone, today I want to talk about the Season 11 PTR meta and build performance and just the way that things are looking. There's a lot of stuff in this patch and the game is changing in a very big way. It's getting slower, harder, and tougher. Everything is just like changed in general. So obviously there is a lot of moving variables right now, a lot of unknowns right now. So take everything with a grain of salt. And of course, this is not a final patch. Usually there are some relatively large adjustments going from the PTR to the live patch, and this PTR is way earlier than normal, giving the devs more time to cook. So with that being said, I do expect that we're gonna see some relatively large adjustments in the final patch, but at least to give you a bit of a perspective of how things are looking, I want to make this video to give you an idea. So with that being said, I want to talk about just what happened going from Season 10 to Season 11. Well, first of all, we have the temper changes, masterwork changes. So in general, the power level is going way down as a result of that. I made a video about this if you want to know more about it. But TLDR, everything is going down because of this. And the Season 11 theme also doesn't really offer pretty much any power at all. It's like very tiny stuff compared to Season 10, which is like the craziest season theme we've ever had in this game so far. So just that alone leaves us with something like -20 to -40 pit tiers on each individual build that we have in this game. So just keep that in mind. In Season 10, we had, like, for example, Rake Spiritborn pushing like 140s and, a bunch of other Spiritborn builds in like the 130 something range. And then there's like, a little bit behind that, like 125 plus, like, I don't know, some Necros and some Druids and whatever. So all that stuff is going way down and everything is going way down. Now, I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. This is just kind of like moving the game forward with the new patch, and we just have to kind of like recalibrate what means a good build effectively. But yeah, just to give you a bit of a perspective here, obviously the Chaos Armor only builds are completely vanishing. So this includes, for example, the like Evade Rake build or something like that we had on Spiritborn. Like, you can't combine these two unique weapons anymore, for example. Shout Dust Devil Barb is gone. The Soul Rift Shadow Blight build, the Ravens build. I mean, technically you can do Ravens, but I don't think this is really gonna be a big thing. So there were like a bunch of Season 10 only builds that just no longer exist. So keep that in mind. And on top of that, we also had various builds and classes that really benefited from the Season 10 powers in some big ways, or were kind of like target nerfed in the Season 11 patch notes. So this includes first and foremost the Druid, which had insane Season 10 powers, especially overabundance. They're also like now just way squishier and got a Grizzly Rage nerf, and a bunch of other stuff is going down there, but they at least have some good builds still. Then we have the Sorks, the TP nerf. Not really directly a power nerf on like a pushing level, for example, but it is also relatively impactful for like the overall class performance, I would say. But you can still go relatively fast. And they also got hard carried by advanced techniques, the core skill perk in Season 10. So that is a huge thing, and Sorks are kind of down with that. Barbs didn't really have anything super crazy in Season 10, but they also were just not really in a great spot in general and didn't really get enough, I think. So this is mostly where I would expect some buffs. I would also expect some buffs and maybe some unnerfs here on like the Druids, for example, but we'll see. At least, I'm talking about what we're gonna see on the Season 11 PTR for now. And then Spiritborn, anti-stonks, but they are still the strongest class in general. So they have at least, maybe not necessarily the strongest build, but it's relatively close. It's like a few builds up there that are kind of competing with each other on that title, but Spiritborn certainly has the most very strong builds. So talking about like the top tier pushers, I expect Spiritborn to be quite up there yet again, even though they lose this crazy, like, 3 different quarterstaff combinations they could do in Season 10. Before we continue with the video, I want to give a shout out to today's sponsor, boot.dev. They've created a platform that makes it easier than ever to get into programming and polish your skills. They believe that the easiest way to learn code is to make sure that you're never bored, and this is why they have designed their courses to feel more like a game and less like a chore. The only way to really get into programming is to get your hands busy and write a ton of code, and this is exactly what the tasks allow you to do without ever feeling like you're getting stuck, because they have tons of tools to help you out. In these courses, you're going to learn backend programming from start to finish in the Python and Go languages. As you may know, programmers have huge earning potential. In the US, the median is upwards of 100K per year. And additionally, they can very often work from home, which is very convenient. And what I find really admirable about boot.dev is that they really follow their mission. Even for people that don't have the means to pay for a membership, they offer all of their content for free to read and watch. The paid membership only unlocks the interactivity and the game that goes with the programs. Compared to attending a university course, boot.dev is a way cheaper solution and allows you the flexibility of doing it all at your own pace and from home. They offer both a monthly and annual subscription, and you can cancel in the first 30 days, no questions asked. So if you really want to learn coding and that convinces you, then go check out boot.dev with the link in the description or the pinned comment below. And you get 25% off your first payment to boot.dev by clicking that link or using my code. And now let's go back to the video. And now with all that being said, I guess it's time to jump into what is actually going on the Season 11 PTR. So we have kind of a very different perspective now on the game and what is a good build. So 100 plus pits or tower now is actually going to be really top tier, highest end. There might be some builds maybe scratching 110 or something with some tryharding and really good sanctifies and whatever. But I think this is roughly where we're going to see the top end perform. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a lot of Spiritborn up here. So we have Evade, Payback is looking very promising, Crushing Hand is going to be here, Toxic Skin, there's a lot of stuff here on Spiritborn. And we might do some more crazy stuff when we experiment more. There's, for example, Minotaur Silic, which is actually currently bugged on the PTR with how much damage you take. It's actually very hard to play these builds and survive with it. And that is kind of funny since it's supposed to make you extremely tanky. But that is an issue, and this makes it very hard to really play those builds. And speaking of Silic, I also want to mention this here. You will probably see a bunch of PTR videos and the clears maybe on the leaderboards and stuff like that in the game. Anything that has a Silic equipped, I would take with a big grain of salt. In particular, there is a Druids of Cataclysm. Ancestral Guidance Paragon node is not capped. That is guaranteed getting capped. Same thing with Hoda. Hoda gives you a ridiculous damage multi that is currently not capped with your maximum fury. And the same for Renati's Magnum Opus, which can actually be used on plenty of bar builds. So you can kind of cheat your way up on the PTR with that. So anything you see with Silic, I would just disregard for now, because I'm not 100% sure if we're actually going to have any builds where this is going to be the optimal choice. And if so, it's probably not by a large margin. So just kind of keep that in mind. But just to give you a bit of an idea of how much more powerful some builds are, thanks to this oversight that we have on some of these uncapped resource scaling mechanisms with the new Minotaur of Silic, well, we're expecting some pretty big, downgrades here when the final patch comes. So somewhere in the range of 15 to 40 pit tiers for these effects I just mentioned. There is potentially some more stuff out there that I couldn't think about here, but basically, they made Silic hard into what is the Season 10 mana shield, so you're gonna have something like a insane amount of maximum main resource now, thanks to scaling your primary main stat and your primary resource. So we're gonna have builds with something like 20, 30, 40,000 resource, and if you have an item like Renati's Magnum Opus, you get more damage per resource, and well, they made everything capped in this patch, but a few things. So just as an example, Inner Sight doesn't just fill your energy now, it actually gives you flat 300, which generally will give you full energy, but not with Silic. And this thing was just missed on a bunch of effects. So anything you see on PTR with Silic, especially this year, don't look at that, basically. So yeah, going back to our level 100 plus list here. So we have the Spiritborns here. So right now you might see some Cataclysm and some Hoda and whatever, but this is definitely not gonna stay there. Crackle Sork is actually looking pretty good, but it's really only the one shining star on the sky of Sork, basically. It doesn't really seem like any other build gets close to that. And this is kind of the only thing to kind of build on right now, it seems. There's a bunch of stuff on Necro. Shadowblight is definitely up there. There's maybe some more potential, I'm not 100% sure, but Necro is overall looking pretty good, I would say. So if I had to say the top two classes, that's Spiritborn and Necro kind of together with the most really strong builds. They are chilling, they're doing pretty well. And there's also, for example, Pulv. I think that's also in like the 100+ territory, especially if they fix the puddle bugs. I think on Season 11 PTR right now, it's still like the old bug that we had in Season 9 that was fixed at some point and then came back. But if that is fixed, then this would also still be really good. Now, obviously, there might be a few more builds kind of like getting into that territory that we have not seen yet, or, you know, we're probably not gonna really get to test everything, and we're gonna learn more when the season actually comes out. But for now, this is kind of like the builds to lean on here in general. And then we can go down here to like the next tier of builds effectively. So like, let's say 90+. What else is here? So golems are definitely looking really good. I think lunge barb is looking kind of fine. So barbs have something going for them. I'm not sure about this. There was this like 12-second barb back in like Season 9, I think. And that might still be kind of a thing with Mighty Throw, or maybe like, you know, some other variation of that. A bunch of rogue stuff is here. So Death Trap, maybe. Rains of Arrows, maybe. I think this is definitely in this territory, and this and this. So these are all kind of like relatively strong builds as well on the pushing end, but they're all just kind of not really, like all of these are basically not really great like farming builds and stuff like that. So there's definitely a bit of like a versatility problem, I guess, in terms of, you know, can you use these builds for everything, or are they just pushing only? Where, for example, here we actually have relatively like all-rounder builds, for example. So this is obviously like, you know, insane, and a bunch of other like Spiritborn builds are also just kind of fast, really good farmers and so on. So nothing really wrong there. And with some slight adjustments, you can just start blasting for everything in the T4 content, for example. And yeah, kind of similar with like these here, right? But if you're looking at like something like this is a Heartseeker, Force Soul Arrow with Orphan Maker, for example. These are just not extremely comfy builds, I would say. And then we also have just like a bunch more builds here: Spiritborn, Druids, Necros. So kind of like the next in line when you look at, let's say, the currently existing Season 10 tier list here. This is what we have here. This is not a Season 11 ranking, so keep that in mind when you look at this now. But yeah, basically, if you look at this, it roughly affects most of the builds in like similar ways here, minus the ones I mentioned that are gonna completely disappear or have, you know, something really strong going for them, you know, like the like Season 10 only rake stuff and so on that I mentioned, or like these other like Season 10 only builds like the Dust Devil, Shout Barb and stuff like that. But yeah, basically, you know, it's kind of like all moving down in relatively similar ways. And if you say, okay, there is yeah, like a bunch more builds of these classes, there's a few options, at least, I would say. So in the case of Spiritborn, I would say something like, you know, Touch of Death is probably around here, and then maybe something like Rock Splitter and whatever. And then for Druids, we might have, you know, stuff like Companions, Fleshhunter might still be kind of nice, and yeah, maybe some more here like Landslide and stuff like that. And then on a Necro, I wouldn't really count on like the like Blood Skills, for example. But Bone Spirit is certainly going to land somewhere here. I think that should be pretty solid, and other builds like that. And then when we go down a little bit more to like 80+, I'm not 100% sure, so I have not really tested too much of the like kind of like lower tier builds or so. I think there might be some potential for like an actual kick build, thanks to like some of the new unique items here that we've gotten. I've tried Frozen Orb myself, so I guess there's some sort of hype around it since they changed Frozen Orb and the Fractured Winterglass. It's definitely a pretty solid build, so I would say this is kind of like the solid territory when it comes to like, you know, tier list, for example. Yeah, Dance on Knives, there's also a bit of a focus on that, thanks to the new unique pants that this build has received. And it turns out the unique pants are just not enough, so we're still gonna play with Poison Trap, at least in the late game. So I tried it, and it's definitely better when you go Poison Trap / Dance on Knives, triggering them with Bursting Venoms, and pure Dance on Knives just kind of like falls off at least once you enter Torment 4. So you need like really good gear, and then it's kinda okay to do Torment 4 with that, but this one goes way beyond that. And then in general, I think a lot of stuff will kind of like land here, like Rogue, Barb, and Sork territory. So it's gonna be like more of these like Barb core builds and like the alternative Barb basic builds and stuff like that will be here probably, where Lunch is like kind of like, you know, a clear winner, for example. And yeah, also more like the Sork core skills and so on that I expect to be landed in this territory, and stuff like maybe Hydra and so on. And for the rogues, I guess similar, like most of the like kind of like weaker core skills I would also expect in this range. So what will this mean for the tier list in the future? Well, we have not created a Season 11 tier list or so, but realistically, if we're talking about pushing builds, we're gonna focus on the tower, which now actually has like an in-game leaderboard attached to it. So you can actually see this here. You can see the listings. For some reason, it's like upside down right now. So it starts with the lowest tier and the worst time, and then it kind of ascends from there, which is kind of weird, but I guess that will be fixed. And I do expect that people are gonna focus a little bit more on like the tower pushing and stuff like that compared to, for example, pit pushing in the future. So I guess pit pushing is gonna be generally somewhat of a thing of the past, and the two systems are mostly relatively similar anyway, and they're gonna play pretty much the same builds for pushing purposes in both of these anyway. So when it comes to like kind of estimating a raw build's performance and a raw power, then the tower is going to be a relatively good way to see that. Now the thing is, we don't have like any sort of filters for the actual builds, so you're probably just going to see like the #1 meta build on the leaderboard for the most part, and this is like very close. Like if you're talking about like the Spirit Bond, for example, definitely there will be some variety here, but when you're talking about, let's say, the next in line, like Zorks, they have like Crackle, and then maybe 10 tiers behind is like the next build or something. So you're probably going to see Crackle for like the entire top 1000 or something on the leaderboard. So this is also something where it's going to be kind of tough to judge some of the builds without some proper benchmarking. And what it means for the tier list here is that we're probably also going to like just readjust, okay, what is, you know, the mark of an S tier build, an A tier build, B tier, and so on. So for example, we have these little notes here right now in our max roll tier list. Like, okay, there was actually a very large band of possible results, right? So we had like the, like, you know, 130 plus, I believe, here, and then like 120 plus and 110 plus and so on. So kind of like that. And I think that band is just going to shrink a little bit because the gaps between builds are definitely like shrinking a little bit as well. And also just like the builds that we will expect people to play, there are just fewer of them. Like in season 10, pretty much anything was at least viable or decent, and it kind of everything felt OP, even all the way down to like stuff like these like C tier builds here basically, because even being 30 tiers behind, well, it didn't really matter. You just one-shot everything anyway, outside of the pit at least. And you easily get your glyphs to 100 anyway, so who really cares, right? Like you could easily play like some really wacky off-meta stuff in season 10, and I don't really expect that to happen as much in season 11, because just the general power level is going down, and if you really want to have a decent time in Taunt 4, a decent time doing those lair bosses, an easy time leveling your glyphs to 100, well, I guess we're gonna see a lot more people gravitate towards some of the top builds. And that also concludes this outlook on season 11 so far. So there's definitely more stuff to come here with my PTR testing. So we have a few more days. I will be like looking for like whatever I still need to test. There's a lot of videos coming, so stay tuned for those. And then of course, as the season 11 patch notes roll around in I guess something like 4 weeks from now or so, get ready for a bunch of uploads on my side. I'm gonna have a bunch of video guides for various builds. There's gonna be a lot of cool stuff, and let's see what the devs are cooking until then. For now, this is what I got here. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if I missed some builds or something like that. There might be some stuff that is still worth checking out. You know, for example, on my stream, on the PTR, while I still can. So anything else, let me know. Otherwise, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.